today's video, we're gonna be building a $535 budget ITX gaming PC. This is a pretty straightforward build and at a very affordable price with room for upgradability. I'll be using new and refurbished components that you can pick up yourself online from stores like Amazon and Newegg. A brief thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video. We're gonna chat more about them later on, but for now, let's get started. For this build, I'll be using the Intel i3-12100F. This CPU offers decent gaming performance for the price. I picked this one up from Amazon for less than $90. It's a quad-core processor with a base clock of 3.3 GHz, but can boost up to 4.3 GHz. Now, this obviously isn't the most powerful CPU on the market, and for more demanding AAA titles or highly CPU-intensive games, you may want to consider something higher end. However, at this tight of a budget, I think it's going to pair very nicely with our dedicated GPU for a good 1080p gaming experience. Of course, we're going to need a motherboard to pair with the 12100F, and for this build, I'll be using the ASRock H610M ITX AC. This is a cost-effective motherboard designed for budget builds. I picked this one up from Amazon for less than $120. Something to understand here as well is that ITX components are typically more expensive than standard ATX parts, so it's difficult to find a new motherboard for much less than this. Still, ASRock is a reliable, well-established brand, and while this budget motherboard may lack the more advanced features the more expensive boards have, it still has all the essential features we would need, such as USB 3.2, gigabit LAN, and built-in Wi-Fi. So let's lower the CPU into the socket and it should fall right into place. Then, when it's fully seated, we can lower the latch. This board has one M.2 slot, so I'll be installing a 500 gig Crucial P3 Plus SSD. Now, when it comes to SSDs, I usually buy Samsung or Crucial, but it doesn't have to be those brands. I would say just stick to a brand that you feel like you can trust within your budget. I picked this one up from Amazon for only $26. Let's install the RAM next, and I picked up 16 gigs of Corsair's Vengeance DDR4 3200 memory. These should work great with the build as the 3200 MHz speed is plenty fast for gaming and multitasking. Also, 16 gigs is enough RAM for most gaming and general purpose needs. Corsair is also a brand that I have personally trusted for many years now. Everything I bought from them has been high quality and reliable. We just need to make sure that the notch is correctly aligned, then apply even pressure until you hear both sides click into place. The 12100F comes with a CPU cooler, which is convenient here as it will save us some money. If you have the extra budget to buy a third-party cooler, then those can be more effective. However, the one that comes in the box should work just fine for now until you want to make that upgrade. The cooler comes with thermal paste applied, and if you don't have a tube of thermal paste, then you should be just fine using it. But I personally like to apply my own, so I'm going to clean it off and apply a line right down the middle of the CPU. No need to overthink or stress this step. Just apply about as much as you see here, and that should be plenty. So let's lower the cooler over the CPU and align the 4 pins with the 4 holes on the motherboard. Then gently apply pressure to the 4 pins until you hear them pop into place. This is not my favorite CPU cooler install method, and in some instances, it can be a little tough, so just take your time here. Then let's plug the cooler into the CPU fan header, and that's the motherboard prepped. It's looking good so far, so let's grab the case. The case I'm using today is the Thermaltake Core V1. Now, this is not the smallest ITX case on the market, but it's still compact, is a great value, and is also pretty easy to work in. There's some easy cable management under the motherboard tray to keep everything looking clean, and it also includes this massive 200mm front fan with the ability to add more for some excellent cooling potential. I picked this one up from Amazon as well for only $40. All right, let's get the case ready by unscrewing these 2 thumb nuts holding the top panel and popping the panel off. Then we can do the same to the left and the right side panels. I'm gonna start off by installing the power supply first, and in this build, I'll be using the Corsair CX650M. This is a semi-modular power supply, meaning the basic cables are attached and cannot be removed, while some of the extra cables are removable. Modular power supplies help keep your build cleaned up as you won't have all these extra unused cables. Now, many ITX cases need a smaller SFX power supply, which are generally more expensive than an ATX power supply like this one. And that's actually another really nice feature about this case, as it does support these larger, less expensive ATX power supplies, saving us some money. I picked this one up from Best Buy for $80, and while there are definitely less expensive options out there, I do not like to cheap out on power supplies, even in a budget build, because if something goes wrong, the collateral damage could affect other components. For this build, I'll only need one PCI Express cable along with a pre-attached one. So let's remove this bottom panel and then lower the power supply with the fan facing out. Then we can secure it with the 4 screws. Now we can flip the case back over and grab our motherboard I/O plate. You'll want to make sure that this is oriented correctly, then align it into the back and push it into place until all sides are fully seated. Next, let's install our motherboard by lowering it into the case and aligning it with the I/O plate and the standoffs. Then secure it with the included 4 screws. Okay, now we can finally start plugging stuff in. I'm going to grab the case cables first and plug the case fan in at the top. Then on the right side of the motherboard, we can plug in the USB 3.0 and front I/O connector. Finally, we can plug in the HD audio connector on the bottom left. And for power, we can plug in the 8-pin CPU and the giant 24-pin motherboard connector. Okay, we're getting pretty close now, so let's tidy up these cables and move on to the best part. For the GPU, I picked up a refurbished GTX 1660 Super for $140 on Newegg. This is still a capable graphic card at this price range. Now, you may need to lower some settings for newer AAA games, but many popular games can still be played at high settings 1080p, especially if you want to use this machine for esports titles and competitive shooters, which is really not bad for the price. Now, if you have an extra $50 or so, then it would be worth looking at the RX 6600. That card is one of the best budget GPUs available, but at this sub $530 build price point, I think this is a good option. Okay, let's remove this little cover, then unscrew and remove the slot covers. Now we can open the PCI Express slot, lower the GPU into the slot, and gently push it until it locks into place. Then we can secure it with those same 2 screws and pop that cover back in. Now I'm going to plug in the 8-pin PCI Express power cable and do a bit of cable management. Let's put the bottom and side panels back on, and that's the build complete. Before starting this channel, I was a web developer and a software engineer, so I know just how much time it takes to build a good looking website from scratch. With Squarespace's customizable templates, you can set up a professional website in minutes and customize the look, content, and features until it's tailored perfectly to fit your needs. Just choose one of their flexible templates and start uploading and organizing all your files in their new asset library, which allows you to access all of your files throughout the Squarespace platform. With everything uploaded, you can start to build out your site using pre-built layouts, which will save so much time while ensuring that the website has a cohesive look and feel. When you're ready to build one for yourself, head over to squarespace.com/DevinJohnston to start your free trial. Squarespace is also offering my subscribers 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Okay, so now let's check out the performance. A high refresh rate 1080p monitor would be ideal here, as this PC can hit frame rates over 60 at high settings in many titles, especially competitive shooters. Now for our obligatory look at Cyberpunk. Using the high preset at a native 1080p, and we're getting around the high 50s to low 60 frames per second. You could probably lower these settings a bit to have a more stable 60 frames experience, but overall, Cyberpunk is very playable here. Spider-Man at a native 1080p, not utilizing any type of upscaling or dynamic resolution, is a very smooth and enjoyable experience. It's consistently over the 60 frames target at the high preset and commonly going as high as 80 frames when swinging around New York. Just like Spider-Man, Guardians is also holding up really well on this 12100F plus 1660 Super combo at over 60 frames per second, often around 70 to 80 frames using the high preset. It's no surprise then that Doom Eternal runs great on this machine, as it's a very well optimized game, and we are seeing well over 120 frames using the ultra setting preset. Testing out Apex Legends in 1080p using the highest settings, and this budget build is holding up really well at over 100 frames per second. This is absolutely enough for competitive 1080p gaming. The same can be said for Overwatch 2. Again, 1080p ultra settings and consistently over 130 frames per second. If you have a high refresh rate monitor and want to utilize it, this is a game where you could lower the settings to high to get a massive bump to around 170 to 200 frames per second without any real meaningful impact to the visuals. Temperatures are looking great as well, with the GPU rarely exceeding 72 degrees and the CPU sitting at below 60 degrees most of the time. If you had any concerns using the stock cooler for a gaming build like this, I don't think there's much to worry about here. It seems to be keeping the system cool no problem. All of these gaming tests are done with the panels attached to the case with an ambient room temperature of 23 degrees Celsius, and it still manages to be virtually silent even under a full gaming load. So not bad for a $530 machine. I think the only things I would change here is to add a few exhaust fans on the back. That would help move out that hot air more efficiently. And while I am very happy with the price to performance on the 1660 Super, I do think it would be worth spending the extra $50 or so for the RX 6600. That'll get you a decent increase in performance, which would help especially for those newer, more demanding games. Either way, for an ultra budget 1080p build, I'm pretty happy with the results. But anyway, let me know what you think in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.